Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Ahmed Bukhash. I'm the Chief Architect and Founder at ArchIdentity, as well as a juror within the House of the Future competition. It is our pleasure to be joined by Ms. Abir Tahlak, who is the Director of Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation, who will be presenting more about the House of the Future competition. And then I will continue to introduce our guests following the introduction. So it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you, Ahmed. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Allow me to introduce you to the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation, which was originally established to cultivate the culture of innovation within the UAE government. Through the development of an integrated framework in line with the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, our UAE Vice President and Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai, to enhance governmental operations and the country's competitiveness by making the UAE government one of the most innovative nations in the world. The center's vision emphasizes on driving the continuous renewal of the UAE government by making innovation a daily practice, and to become the main catalyst for government work and provide platforms and tools to achieve that goal. The center's work in alignment with the UAE's Vision 2031, We the UAE. We focus on unlocking the individual's full potential and enhancing the UAE's position as a global hub for innovation. At the center, we also play a pivotal role in the achievement of the UAE Centennial 2071, where we support the innovation ecosystem here in the UAE and continuously drive the public sector innovation culture across the UAE and the region here. We work closely with partners. We collaborate on different initiatives and programs to ensure the full potential of public sector innovation is implemented and reached. The House of the Future competition is one of many initiatives that the center works on. We aim to inspire and challenge architects, designers to think beyond the traditional boundaries and envision a new era of housing that captures the essence of modern Emirati living, keeping in mind the Emirati way, the Emirati culture, environment, traditions, and the values that the Emirati family stands for. The competition, of course, seeks to foster creativity, sustainability, innovation, transform the way we build and design our current homes. Ultimately, reach the main goal to make people's lives more safe, secure, and provide citizens and families with creative options. The competition is under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, our Crown Prince of Dubai, Chairman of the Executive Council of Dubai. As you all know, Dubai has always been a pioneer in introducing bold, creative, and innovative initiatives. This will also add to its profile as a global futuristic architectural trendsetter, hopefully, where our jury here and the panel for the competition will support us to disrupt and find new design solution that will refresh the current housing offerings for the citizens of Dubai, and main thing, disrupt how we are used to or how we behave or look at houses. The competition will run through September. Winners will be announced in an award ceremony to be held hopefully in November. The winners of the competition will receive a total of 1 million dirhams in prizes. Of course, it's important to emphasize that we have a special category, a design for the self-sustaining house, which this panel and talk today will talk more about with our experts. The main aim of the special category is to be able to go off the grid for 2 weeks. What would that mean? What are some of the solutions and ideas that we would receive? We are at the year of sustainability in the UAE. We'll be hosting COP28 late in the year, this year. So we at the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation always aim for more collaboration and provide opportunities for more innovative minds and practices to work together to showcase impactful and valuable ideas for the UAE and the world. So thank you, Ahmed, and thank you for being here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Abir, for the kind introduction and also for clarification on the House of the Future competition. It is my pleasure to introduce Charles Wooker. Charles Wooker, representing Zaha Hadid Architects. He is a board director of Zaha Hadid Architects, leading one of the practice's 3 design business units. He has 30 years of professional experience delivering exceptional projects worldwide and is qualified as both a registered architect and a chartered structural engineer, bringing a unique perspective to Zaha Hadid's works. He studied at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, and then structural engineering at the Imperial College of Science and Technology and Medicine in London. Before joining Zaha Hadid Architects, he worked at Arab and Partners, where he founded the Advanced Geometry Unit and was instrumental in leading and building the unit's reputation for innovative design and engineering projects until 2007, when he joined Zaha Hadid Architects. He has extensive experience in teaching. He led an intermediate teaching unit at the Architectural Association to 2010 and founded the annual Pavilion program. He was also a visiting international professor in the emerging technologies at TU Munich 2010 and served as a head of program in architecture at the Royal College of Art in London from 2011 and 2014. He has been project director also for the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Riyadh, which completed in 2017. And he's also leading the team of integrated sustainable technology to meet LEED Platinum certificate. So Charles, it is our great honor to have you on board.
Thank you.
We're also joined with Will Plowman. He's a partner and architect at Foster and Partners. He currently heads up the Dubai office for Foster and Partners. He received his education in architecture from the University of Newcastle and London Metropolitan University, graduating in 2007 before joining Foster and Partners. He gained valuable site experience on a variety of award-winning residential and educational projects, including Crouch Hill in London, which is UK's first zero carbon in-use school. Since joining Foster and Partners in 2011, Will has worked on a number of significant projects around the world, including Sao Paulo's sustainable Brooklyn Tower in Brazil and a 200-meter skyscraper in for a Marriott hotel and a private developer in Huangzhou, China. Will has also been heavily involved in the Lana project by Dorchester Collection, a new hotel and residences development in Dubai. It is a great pleasure to have you both with us, and I'm sure it will be a very fruitful session.
Thank you very much.
So, just to, since we are, it's a very compact session, I would like to first ask you a kind of a very, intrinsic and simple question, but I think it's very essential to pick your brains, you being pioneers in the field and successful models for all architects in the future. So we'd like to ask the first question, which is, what are examples of innovative methods and new materials being used to address global challenges in terms of housing affordability? So I'll leave it up to maybe Charles, if you can warm the waters, as they say.
Sure. Well, it's kind of hard to talk about this topic without also partially addressing the issue of sustainability or embodied carbon, because a lot of the innovative new techniques have been developed to address that. I mean, just one of the key issues at domestic scale construction is prefabrication. And now we're using this term MMC, modern methods of construction, trying to move as much work as possible off-site so that when the components of the building arrive at site, they go together very quickly. And it means that most of the parts of the building are fabricated under in the shop floor under higher quality conditions where you can get more control. So and also, like recent develops in material, in some senses, timber is the new concrete. Like now using LVL or laminated veneer lumber, CLT cross laminated timber, and also what's called SIPs, structural integrated panel systems. So in a sense now, the strengths that we see in timber are comparable to the strength of material we saw in concrete like 40 years ago. And it offers the possibility of these, it's also a material that sequesters carbon rather than creates carbon. And it's obviously it lends itself very well to prefabrication as a panel system. So those are some of the trends. I also just wanted to mention quickly, I'm not sure it's relevant to the competition, but there's also a new movement in residential construction they call the tiny house movement. You may have read a little bit about that. And I think, another way of kind of addressing energy or energy use is to kind of make a more compact home or a slightly more compact design. Maybe we can talk a bit about that later, because that also comes into, it moves slightly off topic because it moves into the area about how you use domestic space.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charles. Will, if you'd like to please share your thoughts as well.
Yeah, just to build on what Charles was saying, I think prefabrication, modular construction is really setting out new boundaries and creating incredible projects. I think it's also interesting to look at, especially in the UAE, what we have close to us. We have sand, we have Hatta not far away, which is available rocks, even disused recyclable materials. How can we reuse those and reinterpret them? I think you gave an amazing talk recently on Shabab in Yemen in mud construction, and I think the combination with that, with 3D printing and the new kind of leaps and bounds you can go to with be able to 3D print using clay construction, using other materials within that, even recycled materials. I think that's something that we should definitely see more of, and I think it's exciting we're in this space to be able to do that. I think there's obviously challenges with 3D printing, especially with the climate. How do you GRC and concrete setting, and how to reduce those, as you said, the embodied energy, and trying to reduce concrete generally is a great step forward. I think if we can build smaller houses, again, that micro, I think UAE has got an amazing opportunity because it has 7-8 months of amazing weather. We can be outside more. I think the courtyard house is also something that needs to come back more, because looking even at how the courtyard house was exported to places like Spain and Granada. From the traditional Arabic housing, I think we can almost bring that back as something very interesting.
Yeah, correct. I think from my point of view, as a small architecture firm, a boutique architecture firm, we always struggle to look for new materials, especially when addressing requirements of housing, because of course you need to look at the lifespan of any villa, which goes up to 30 years plus. So I think it's very important for us to make sure of the materials being used. When somebody mentions timber, for example, in our traditional houses, my thought goes back to our own traditional courtyard houses, which was using African chandlewood, which was the only one that was able to resist the high humidity because due to our harsh climate. So I think adaptability and how materials have become so innovative that materials that you wouldn't normally think of being used in structure works have actually been evolved with new kind of, merged with new technologies in order to make them adaptable to our local climate and resilient to the extreme temperatures. So I think for me, that's basically very interesting thought.
Yes, I was in Dibba recently, and the old shucks from the oyster shells, they'd made all these gabion walls. I think that was a fascinating example of using something that they had, and it was a stunning kind of little pockets of that. So I think we just need to almost restrict what we can have in order to create more.
Exactly. And I think that the key is also for them to being adaptable, because when they launched the competition, it was announced. For me, adaptability of that structure is very important, because, you know, the local housing Emirati family, it grows really fast from the time that you're married to when you have a bigger family household. An average household is around maybe 4 to 5 kids. And, you know, nowadays the children are living with the household a bit longer in time. So you have to look at actually a house that maybe splits up into another 4 houses. So how can we do that in a way while, you know, because obviously there's a limitation with structural. So how do we go about that, and how do we resolve that? I think that would be a very interesting topic that also during our review of the competition entries.
Absolutely. I mean, I think adaptability is a big topic. And there's also kind of a question about how much you build initially and how convenient, or in a way, the design anticipates expansion in the future. Sometimes you can put in place a frame that's easily expandable, but not necessarily clad in the initial stage, that sort of lends itself naturally to a kind of a thought through method of expanding.
100%. And if you think of it in terms of efficiency, it's always easier maybe going with precast systems, but sometimes you notice that the precast systems, they actually contradict the whole idea of expansion, because obviously when you want to expand, you have to break into the wall and expand into other rooms. But having a precast system, which at the same time may be efficient in constructing multiple typologies or a single typology of a villa. So, I mean, how do we try to resolve this issue? Because at the same time, it is tempting, it's efficient, but at the same time, it may not address the whole adaptability idea. So, I mean, that's something, again, that's of interest to me.
Absolutely. Can I just quickly touch on Will's earlier point about traditional methods? Because, you know, I just think it's worth always being aware that, you know, most of modern architecture, like the period of industrialization from, like, you know, say the 1920s to 1970s, that all happened in a period when we had abundant and very cheap energy. And you know, a lot of critics and historians are re-examining that period and reframing it as, you know, a period of very high energy architecture. Like all of these systems, reinforced concrete, steel frames, glass, they all have a very high embodied energy. And then, you know, the excessive use of glass means that buildings are overheating. So then we apply an energy system to moderate the climate inside, which we've already kind of created the problem by overuse of glass in the cladding of the building, you know. So, and all of these systems are just throwing energy at a problem. Think about looking back at historical or traditional methods of construction, is they didn't use much energy. You know, they had to solve the same problems that we solved in the modern era by throwing a lot of energy at the problem. They solved them using like passive cooling through wind towers. They used you know, a very high thermal mass in the building to moderate the diurnal fluctuation of temperatures. And they used traditional materials that they used local materials that they found in the immediate environment. So all of these things have increasing relevance today. But I think at the same time, we you know, to make it contemporary, you want to use everything that's available to you. And so, you know, transportation's relatively cheap today. You can import materials from different parts of the world. And we have new systems of kind of treating materials that they become more durable as well. Yeah. All worth considering in the wider picture.
Yes, 100%. So I'll move on to the second question. It's about sustainability. So sustainable development is a key factor in promoting future housing. What are the key strategies to achieve the same efficiently within our specific regional context?
Is that for me or Charles? I'll jump in. I think
it's a very open, whoever has ideas can feel free to jump in. We're not using any type of system, so it's fine.
I think what was great was at Expo was the water conservation and reverse osmosis, and how because obviously Dubai, one of the hugest challenges is water. But I think also coupling with that is vegetation, because I think the biophilic element is more and more important, and greenifying cities. So it's that balance of how do we get water, how do we use it within a city and even within the house, I think is really interesting and important. I think the Dutch pavilion did something really extraordinary, which was to grow and use water within one space. So I think that was a real eye-opener for me personally, and I think that's something that we can build on that understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I mean, coming back to energy again, like it's great to see the sustainable prize included in the competition, but I would encourage, I think that, the possibility today is also to go further. We've got this idea of the zero energy building. There's a number of zero energy buildings built today. I think the highest is 6 stories so far. There's this American writer, Jeremy Rifkin, who he's written this kind of he's a panelist. He's written a book called The Third Industrial Revolution, where he's proposing that, in the future, all buildings will generate their own power. And that in a way, the excess power could go into a grid, which is composed of, electric batteries and cars, using a smart power system where you could sell power into the grid at certain times and purchase it back at others. And it's kind of a paradigm shift away from central power distribution towards a kind of network of buildings that more like the internet, less of a centralized and radial system, and more of a patchwork or an integrated grid. So I honestly believe, like, if we're looking for the distant future, within 20 or 30 years, I think it really is not unreasonable that most domestic scale construction would be zero energy. And so, certain countries like Vietnam have made this incredible transformation using PVs for a number of buildings to become increasingly energy independent. And I do honestly believe UAE, it's the perfect opportunity to lead as a global example at this scale, at the domestic scale of construction, to consider, maybe even, at least in terms of energy, to be of course connected to the grid, but to be capable of being independent of it. And then on other systems, it's great to see that that's being encouraged as well.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead with it.
No, I was just thinking that with that, I think is also how you get to that, and how you kind of navigate the city. I think the sustainable transport within the housing, it'd be great to see houses without any cars and communities without 0 cars, and walkable between the housing. I think that's something 20-30 years ago in 30 years time we should be looking forward to and seeing. I mean, I think just the cycle tracks that are coming to the UAE are really transforming it. Along the beach, in Kite Beach and Nadal Sheba, how busy they are in just the 4 or 5 years. I think that's coupled with, as you were saying, Charles, energy producing houses. That could be something super interesting. I think it has. I know there's a challenge of the very hot months, but it's the rest of the year. It could be totally transformative.
I mean, density is quite important as concerns walkability, yeah. And I mean, also this touches on heritage, because you know the traditional Islamic city with the courtyard house and the cul-de-sacs and the very narrow shaded streets. These are now, the extent to which that's relevant to the competition is kind of, you know, it has to be thought through. But these are all kind of relevant paradigms for a new type of residential quarter that you know, we could, moving away from high-speed road networks and towards a denser, more compact, walkable community. Absolutely.
So in my opinion, if we had to kind of, because as you know, sustainability is a very big topic. So if we had to summarize it in a quick win scenario, the points that keep on raising to me in terms of what are the most, you know, kind of, I would say, processes that can be improved very quickly with the greatest effect in the minimal time are two major factors that are regarding sustainability. One is construction waste, and the other one is regarding air conditioning. Because, you know, as you know, most of the houses in the UAE, they obviously, because of our unique climate, the air conditioning consumption of a villa is almost like 40, if not more, 40 to 50% of the energy consumption of any other aspect, if not 80%. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's always difficult when I sit with my parents and whenever I sit with them and I would think, and they tell me that not long ago they were living in houses without any air conditioning. You know, to me, it's like, I'm totally cannot even perceive how they were living, because they were telling me stories about when it's really hot, they were used to live on the balconies open to the sky. And then they moved down more in the ground floor and then the winter month to get the warmth. So what are, like, in terms of these two specific points, in terms of construction waste, because obviously, you know, the UAE is building a lot. So how can we minimize that as much as possible? And how can we, if we had a quick win, in your experience, both of you, through your global projects, what have you learned from that? Or what are kind of remedies to fix issues of construction waste and as well as air conditioning to make it more sustainable as an advice for the UAE? How would you share some of that ideas or experiences if you can?
Yeah, I think we're getting, you know, the skills of the kind of younger architects coming through with Revit and BIM and understanding exactly what you can build within it and understanding the weight of the building, working very closely with engineers is really important. I think as a part of policy, it almost should be how we can take the buildings down as well. Because I think waste is not just the build the way, it's also the life cycle of that building. So and that should be really integral into it. I think there was a lot of work done with the building schools for the future in the UK on that side, and how you can take the building down or add to it in the future. So I think that should be a part of the design process. And I think if we look at that from day one, it's a much easier argument.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, like, you know, we're not always as designers, we're not always in control of the issue, the construction waste issue. It's also coming from the contractor, but this touches also on prefabrication, because designing with systems that prefabricated systems, it does tend to eliminate construction waste, because everything's fabricated on the shop floor, where you have more controlled conditions. Can I just touch
about air conditioning?
Yeah, can I just touch on that one? Like,
yes.
A good, like, for me, quite a, you know, in the CAPSARC project in Riyadh, it's actually the building is organized or structured through a kind of an array of cells that vary in size, but those cells are courtyards. And some are open to the sky, some are covered courtyards. But the principle that the building is, you know, clad externally in an opaque material, and that it's a research center, so it was quite suitable that these cells should be inward looking, and a kind of like a community organized around a nice garden and a small exterior space that you could step out to if you wanted to smoke or you wanted to just get fresh air or something, take a break. But that is a traditional type, like the courtyard organization, which in the traditional city was, they were back to back and accessed via these cul-de-sacs, which in themselves formed a secondary or larger community, and then ultimately, connected cul-de-sacs forming a quarter of the city, which was had a defined character and community nature, which is all it's very elegant. In London, one of the most resilient housing types that's still relevant after 100 years is the Victorian terrace. Those party walls that connect homes, like it's stood to this day. Like most of those are protected conservation areas now, because it's just such a flexible and it's such a well-organized paradigm of streets with, we call it 3 up, 3 down. Yeah. And it's withstood 100 years, and still in use today. And the homes are very well loved. So, I think this is, I think bringing back some of those traditional paradigms, those traditional organizational structures. I think in the Middle East region, it's very different from the conditions of London, but traditional solutions which were found, which are highly relevant today, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit out of. Sorry, Will, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think it's super interesting, the idea of the party wall, and I was just thinking that, in terms of sharing air conditioning between villas, there's so many people who are not in the house at the same time. Can that energy be shared to the next one? I think that's smart technology within it as well. So if you're not in the room and that control, I know, for example, many people I know here, the aircon's on all day when it doesn't need to be, and the temperatures, because the monitoring system is not there, and the passive design principles in the first place have been kind of left out, are coupled with this perception of privacy. I think having lived in a terraced house, you do feel very private. You don't ever feel that you're next to someone else, and I think that's a perception. I think here, traditionally, to put them villas very far apart. In fact, I live on one that is a terraced house, and you really don't notice it. So it's definitely a really interesting point, Charles. I think we should look at more of.
And interestingly, Will, they put the chimney breast in the party wall, right? So basically the heating of the building was through the party wall, which is actually a shared surface. It has no external surface. So, kind of a full capture of the heat that was available. So as you say, with air conditioning, it's kind of the same argument, right? If you cool that mass of the party wall, then both tenancies benefit, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great point where you actually go into, because I don't want to skip to the next question, but basically, when you have a building or a unit, a family unit, is actually the whole concept of sharing energy is a beautiful concept, because traditionally we were always taught, always be modest to your neighbor, feel free to share whatever you can with your neighbor, but that doesn't only translate as hospitality, but you are actually saying literally sharing energy in terms of cooling, in terms of heating, and areas where they experience extreme, cold weathers. So I think that's a very interesting topic, and I hope somebody can pick up from that. It will be very interesting.
And also importantly, you then only expose one surface to the sun, just the roof, to both the environmental, exterior, like the temperature of the atmosphere outside, but also to the sun, where there's obviously a lot of heat gain.
Exactly. Like even for me, when I think of, because as you know, the air conditioning, whenever we do it, it always comes from up to below. And you actually have a lot of that space that's actually wasted for the air to reach you, to cool your body. But I see a lot of international practices, they actually have the cooling coming from the floor up. So I always kept on asking, why don't we apply the same? But I always get different kind of answers. So I don't know, maybe Will, with your experience in the UAE, with, you know, bringing some international practices into the UAE. And I think you've also used a similar system in one of your projects, if I'm not mistaken. What were the challenges with that? Like, why doesn't all UAE homes have, you know, cooling coming from the floor up rather than up down?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We actually tried it in within the Lana, but I think what the challenge was having a step within the room in order to push the air around, and then what that stagnant hot air, and how do you? So I think if you've got a 1 or 2 story building, it's definitely possible. I think once you start stacking, it becomes more complicated. But I think the idea that Charles is mentioning about more chimney systems and being able to capture that hot air and put it out that way is definitely possible. I think the idea of chilled beams we've talked about a lot at Foster's as well. And I think in Brooklyn, in Sao Paulo, we looked at this idea. So you're pumping cool air from the base and then cooling it as well. So you've got this double hit of it, which is something that's possible.
Yeah, we actually to produce a zero energy building. This is with office use, but you have to very carefully allocate how much energy you use for all of the various different systems. And one of the things we found working with mechanical engineers is that you couldn't do blown air, that the fans actually use too much energy. So to get to zero energy, we had to use chilled beams. It was only through a water cooling based system that we could get the cooling energy low enough to meet the budget that was required. So I don't know I don't know a lot about chilled beams in a domestic situations. It seems to be mainly used in offices, but that could be something worth considering. Or also a chilled underfloor system with like a underfloor heating, which can also be used for underfloor cooling. Which is also really nice in domestic, underfloor heating is great in domestic buildings because the floor is warm and you can go around in without shoes and, you're in contact with the heated surface. And I'm sure the reverse would apply. So all worth.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the kind of water story, doesn't it? I think one of the things that would be nice to see is not swimming pools, plunked in the garden, but much more integrated into the house. I think in Morocco they do it amazingly, and that water doesn't need to then evaporate, can be reused or even being used for storage, or, as you said, cooling the floors. I think integration of that very, very prized asset, kind of almost that is, energy and water are the two things now. So I think we're so often just put water out and fill it up and keep filling it up, but actually how that energy to make that clean water is. So I think that would be interesting if we could link the chilled beams with play as well. I don't think houses need to be boring, or they still need to be functional and playful. So it's kind of mixing those together.
I think those are some honestly great ideas to have, not things only used for aesthetics or once in a year, where they actually integrate with the villa in a more functional daily usage. I think that's really key to solving a lot of the issues that we're facing. So that I think we've also touched upon this last question of the session, which I know it's in the DNA of all our conversations, which is the UAE's architectural heritage, how it can, as we all know, it provides a wealth of knowledge in terms of passive design techniques that we can adapt for local housing, and how the villa itself can be developed so that it can be more climatized to the natural surrounding environment. So as leaders in the field, how do you think we can adopt the same in our works, in terms of architectural works, to achieve this better efficiency?
Well, shall I start? Well, I mean, I think you have in UAE, it's quite a good situation because you have a rich heritage, which is perhaps less exploited. You know, it's kind of almost like I think there's a great opportunity for new young designers to look back at those paradigms, the materials that were used in the systems, to integrate them into new solutions for the UAE today. I mean, it's a hybrid, isn't it? It's taking the best from the past and hybridizing it with current technologies to meet, you know, cost and energy and sustainability targets. But I see that as opportunity, really. You know, we've talked about the courtyard typology. I think just quickly, another one, you know, we talked a little bit about biodiversity and, you know, kind of in the UK, we have this topic of rewilding, which is super relevant today. So I think overall, Will touched on the issue of water use. You know, I'm kind of beginning to have a bit of a mental image about what that housing typology might look like, and I think it's, you know, it's also maybe a slight shift to something that, in a traditional sense, is a little bit more community focused and maybe a little bit more modest. Like, it doesn't draw on these kind of, you know, grand villa models from Europe and America, like in the American housing, you know, suburban housing model, that actually, that as its source material, it looks much more carefully at local and traditional values and solutions. I think that's going to be quite key, isn't it, to innovating a new type of domestic architecture that's uniquely suited to UAE, that's of its place, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting. I think kind of coupling on that, I think the UK had the green belt to protect the kind of greenery of the, and the density is really interesting. I think the UAE is doing a similar thing with protecting the desert. I think the desert is an incredible asset, and it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I think even bringing that back in, it'd be amazing to see the villas when you open up and see the stars. So I think that understanding of nighttime and bringing that back into the housing typology would be interesting as well. And I think in terms of policy, I think the developers, and I think we talked about it, you know, recycling materials and waste. I think that is there should be a huge focus on pressure on any small scale developer, not just the big players, but, you know, on a domestic scale, making sure that they're not wasting materials, and there's much more value and community spirit to that. I think that's really important.
From what I can sense from both of you, that both of you are saying that it's a win-win scenario when you go and you create this kind of a hybrid scenario where or a hybrid product where it actually borrows from the past and is also modest and simple, which is also aligned with more modernist principles of architecture. And we personally, in my firm, ArchIdentity, we believe in that. And it took us almost 9 years of design and construction, and also 3 years of research to come up with this kind of a perfect kind of solution to finding a modern language based on traditional precedents, based on courtyards, based on wind towers, and so forth. I wouldn't say we were 100% successful, but I think we did attempt it. You know, we could kind of got a good reception. We got awarded for it. But the question is, when I did my master's in Japan, I felt a lot of colleagues, they felt that same passion for their own local Japanese architecture. But there are like tens and hundreds of architects trying to translate that in their own kind of unique, distinctive ways. Why isn't that the case in the Middle East? Is it more about maybe they're not getting promoted enough when we don't know about them? Or are there kind of fundamental things that are keeping that kind of innovation from happening? Because as Will was saying, there are big players and there are small players, like we as small boutique offices, 10 to 30 people or whatever. It's a big difference when you get the big players on board, because then you're talking the scale of cities and hectares. So what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think that you have just touched on it there, which is the speed of growth. I think that's partly what's conditioned the contemporary city in the UAE, because the region has grown so quickly that it brought in a lot of international consultants who brought in all these international systems. Do you know what I mean? And I think perhaps it will take a little longer for, you know, the pot to cook. You know what I mean? Before this younger generation come forward with the kind of perhaps more culturally relevant hybrid solutions that you're touching on. So, I mean, there is some encouragement. You know, like the Aga Khan does his prize, you know, for regional architecture. So there is, but it is the battle of internationalism and regionalism, isn't it? That I'm not sure. Now we see the weakness of both, right? Both offer great solutions, but they have certain compromises. And now maybe this word hybridization of, you know, you know, taking the best from the past and as well as the best from contemporary international production. But I think in contemporary UAE city, probably what conditioned it is the speed of the pace of growth. You know, it just happens so fast.
Exactly, I totally agree. Will, do you have any ideas?
I was saying that I think that with Mazda, we were super fortunate to be able to look at that contemporary city model, but really looking at the past. And I think there's so many lessons that we're still learning from today on that. So I think it is here. It's just as Charles is saying, different agendas, different profiles of people who are living in Dubai. That's also very interesting, I think, and how we cater in modern design for the many different internationals who come here. Because you know, even just looking at the kitchen layout for what a European would want against an Emirati is different, and how we live is different. So it's kind of allowing that adaptability. But having a real focus on doing something regional, I think is and I think it's an exciting time. I think we've learned so much from COVID. That's been an incredible speed of change. I think Lord Foster talked about it himself, about how quickly things are changing since then. So it's really interesting. Even just having this conversation is really exciting to see the possibilities.
Yeah, yes. Sorry, go ahead, Charles.
I was just going to say, well, it's like COVID gave a moment of reflection. You know what I mean? Everything kind of stopped, and so it was a moment of introspection, and now, you know, as everything's restarted, there's you know, some reconsideration of the direction that things are going in, which is the relevance of and the timeliness of this particular competition and study, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thought, and I share an equal level of excitement. Like in my opinion, it would be amazing to bring these experiences that both yourself, Charles, with your experience in the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, actually to see that kind of DNA trickling into the housing compounds, if it's even we are able to do so. And Will, with your experience in Masdar City, you know, but taking it from that kind of special project level to a more domesticated, accessible to everybody, regardless of you know, the backgrounds and the funding and so forth. I think that's really the key that we need to solve. And I think with both of your unique experiences and your backgrounds and your passion to find a solution to this, I think it's just a matter of time until we do find that perfect balance. So I think we've had a very interesting session. So I think as a closing, I'll leave the stage open to both you, Charles and Will, to share any thoughts or closing comments before we end the session. To the mashallah, now we've reached almost 661 people participating in our session. So if you'd like to share some of your closing remarks, it would be great.
Shall I go first? Well,
go for it, Charles.
Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, just thinking about the well, first of all, I think it's fantastic that that the UAE government and leadership have taken the initiative to actually invest time and energy into reconsidering domestic architecture in the UAE. And as I said, I think it's very timely. Like as post-COVID and with soaring global energy prices, changing global values, and the need to perhaps readdress those solutions so that they have more deeply engendered Emirati values, values of community and so forth. So it's just it's a pleasure to be involved, and I just like to thank the yourself for hosting this event, and the organizers for coming forward with the proposal to fund this investigation.
Will?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Yeah, I think difficult to follow that, but I think, thank you very much for inviting us to be a part of this incredible kind of moment in time. I think I don't think there'll be one solution that does it, but I think what we're going to learn from this competition is going to be fascinating, because I think there'll be many exciting entries and discoveries which will hopefully spark a kind of a whole new, as you said, the terraced housing of the UK. That's the exciting thing that's going to happen. So thank you, Bukhash and Charles and Mariam for today. It was super exciting. So I'm looking forward to the next steps.
Yeah, in closing, firstly, of course, I would like to thank Abir Tahlak, the director of Ahmed Bukhash Center for Government Innovation, for launching this competition, and in general for all the stakeholders that were involved in launching this initiative, as well as also founding the theme of this session that we're in now, which is New Frontiers for Sustainable Home Design. We're all excited to review the entries, and I don't know, Abir, if you would like to share some closing remarks from your end as well. I see you've joined us.
No, just wanted to thank Charles, Will, and yourself, Ahmed, for this super interesting conversation. And we're looking forward for the submissions. And again, thank you for all the partners, of course, the Ahmed Bukhash Housing Establishment, who are our partners. And part of the prize is if we will be able to actually build this winning house design, which we're all excited and looking forward to. And of course, for all of you to be on this panel too.
Thank you so much, everybody. And definitely buildability is a major factor in our reviews. So don't worry about that, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.